Well, there's definitely one thing Mike Flanagan did better than Kubrick. I'm wagering he probably treated the actors who played Danny's mom in this one way better than Kubrick treated Shelley Duvall. Dr. Sleep, the latest Stephen King adaptation. This one comes from his 2013 novel, which is a sequel to The Shining. Apparently at book signing, Stephen King was asked by his fans many times, whatever happened to little Danny Torrance? And this question actually lingered in the back of Stephen King's mind, so he decided to write a sequel novel. But as these things go, if you're Stephen King, pretty much automatically anything you write is going to wind up being made into a movie in one way or another. But this leads to a problem. Stephen King did not like Stanley Kubrick's film adaptation of the book, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that Stanley Kubrick insisted on keeping it ambiguous as to whether or not all the horrors witnessed in this film were the product of a family on the verge of collapse, and their minds were just going nuts from solitude and alienation and resentment, or was the Overlook Hotel actually haunted? This did not sit well with Stephen King, but if you're gonna make a movie sequel to The Shining, you gotta abide. You gotta follow on from what the previous filmmaker did. And it's with this thought process in mind that made me go, ooh, I don't know how that's gonna play. But then again, you have someone like Mike Flanagan directing it. That's when I'm gonna pay attention. Mike Flanagan recently has been making a lot of strides in horror with his big breakout in Oculus, which if you have not seen Oculus, I strongly recommend it, especially if you're a Karen Gillan fan. He then broke out big with Netflix on The Haunting of Hill House and with Gerald's Game, a King adaptation which many people thought was totally unfilmable. He was, in my opinion, a spectacular choice to come and direct this film. And I'm sure King was very happy to have him come direct this, especially from my research, I found out Mike Flanagan wasn't particularly fond of Kubrick's original film either. But he also knew that if you're going to make this sequel, you have to play ball with all the people who love the original film, because the original Shining is deeply ingrained in our cinematic consciousness. And so many people love what Kubrick did with the ambiguity, so much so that everyone's got their own interpretation. People have so many interpretations of this film that there's even a documentary talking about all those interpretations. Fuck you, we landed on the moon. Does it work? Yes. Yes, this film absolutely works. And it shouldn't, but it does. But I will say this, whether or not you consider this film to be a worthy follow-up, that really is all down to you. Not only because of how you feel about the original Kubrick film, or even how you feel about the book, but also your sensibilities on what you look for in horror. For a lot of people, they love The Shining because it was so scary. For many of you, if you see my Rare Delicacies, horror is subjective, and it all comes down to what you find scary. Now, for myself, I do love The Shining. I do think it is effective, but I was never really 100% traumatized by it. I just love the film for its artistry. The only thing I was looking for in Dr. Sleep was a strong, character-driven story. That's all I wanted. That we have an incredible cast, Ewan McGregor, Rebecca Ferguson, Kaylee Curran, and Cliff Curtis. And if Mike Flanagan really wasn't so stoked on the original film, does he just throw everything Kubrick did by the wayside? Actually, he does not. In fact, he very passionately recreates a lot of things from the original film. Classic moments, actually even some elaborate camera angles from the original he recreates there. Some sound cues are all in there. The art direction of the Overlook Hotel looks pitch perfect. Flanagan actually does the best he can to have people who love the original film come in, watch this, and still feel like this is a bona fide follow-up to The Shining. That being said, though, for a lot of people who really enjoyed the ambiguity of the original movie, they might get a touch pissed, because unfortunately, in order to tell the story that Dr. Sleep has, you gotta answer some questions. You can't just do what they did in Blade Runner 2049 and still leave it hanging on whether or not Rick Deckard's a replicant. In order to tell the story that they're gonna tell with Dr. Sleep, they have to flat out say, yes, there were ghosts in the Overlook Hotel, and they were messing with the Torrance family. They had to flat out say it, because revealing this was essential to tell the story as it was here. Because Dr. Sleep, for the most part, is a self-contained story. But the reason why it works so well as a sequel is because it actually does build and enrich our understanding of certain things that we may have only gotten little whispers of in the original. For myself, I actually was kind of iffy on The Shining as a concept. I now have a better understanding of what, in essence, The Shining is, and not just what it is to Danny, but what it represents to everyone else who has it. And it's essential that we understand this, because otherwise the story would be nothing. Where we see Danny Torrance still coming to terms with the traumas of all the horrific things that he saw a long time ago. And you see him also trying to find new ways to use his ability to be able to try to bury those horrors in the past. But unfortunately, all of his strain to try and put those to bed have left him on this downward spiral where when we find him as an adult in about 2011, he is an alcoholic, he is a wreck, he is trying desperately to numb himself from ever having to confront these horrors ever again. But he's not doing so well, and in his efforts to try to escape it, he ends up drifting, and he ends up in this small little town where he meets someone named Billy, played by Cliff Curtis. He ends up sober, and he actually has a really great job working in hospice, and he uses his ability. And I gotta say, this sequence of scenes actually had me getting really misty-eyed. I think I was on the verge of tears. He's using his ability to give people a lot of peace and solace. So as it goes on, you find him in a really good place. And as an extra bonus, he actually ends up becoming something of a psychic pen pal to a little girl named Abra who also has the Shining. Unfortunately, this comes with a bit of a problem. Another thing we establish at the beginning of the film is that there's a wandering family, a cult, if you will, a group of people, a very close-knit group who, well, they also have the Shining, but they have been alive for a very, very long time. And the secret to this is that they, in a very brutal fashion, leech off other people who have the Shining. There is one scene in this film which is exceptionally disturbing, which had me just squirming, where I'm like, I can't believe I'm watching this, but simultaneously I'm grateful that I'm watching this, because in order to hit home how horrific this cult is, you gotta show them doing something that any decent-minded person is going to condemn them for. Because you see them doing this, and then alternatively seeing them as this actually very harmonious, very functional family unit, where you see that they have nothing but affection for each other, it puts the audience on this really odd even keel, particularly when you meet the leader of the pack, Rose of the Hat, played by Rebecca Ferguson. This is the stand-up performance of the film. Ewan McGregor's great, Kaylee Curran's great, the cast is razor sharp, but she is the one who really stands out from the pack. She helps us understand her motivations, and because we understand them so well, we're put on this very odd footing where we're going, I totally get it, I even in a way sympathize, and if I were in your position, I might even do the same thing. And when a villain makes you do that, that's a big win. Dr. Sleep operates more as a thriller as opposed to, from my perspective, a horror film. This is a film that's much more about the impending menace of this seemingly unstoppable force that wants to come and destroy you for their own means. And seeing them do the horrific things they do definitely does a great job in ramping up the tension. You have Danny Torrance, who is trying desperately to stay hidden and, you know, just live this peaceful life that he's been able to cultivate for himself. But he also knows that because he has this friend who could still have the potential of a good, peaceful life, he himself has to confront his own personal demons in order to help this person and deal with theirs at a very early age. Because the central theme of this movie is about confronting trauma and being able to come to peace with the horrors of your past. And the film carries this through incredibly well with Ewan McGregor's spectacular performance, and it carries you all the way through to a fantastic final showdown at the Overlook Hotel. And I was worried that this sequence was going to get a little too fan servicey, and I know a lot of people are going to feel that it is, but because it all is in aid of Danny utilizing these demons and finally coming to peace with them, and even to a great effect, even utilizing these demons to win out in the end, it never feels gratuitous. It never feels like they're just doing this, hey, see, we love The Shining too, see, really? No, it actually feels organic to the story. It feels right. That being said, though, the final resolution does harken back to the end of the original novel of The Shining. Stephen King, you just wanted to get revenge against Kubrick, didn't you? That's all. That's what all this is about. And I think that's what's going to push a lot of people away from Dr. Sleep, because there's going to be a lot of people who believe that Kubrick was right to do what he did in keeping it uncertain. Basically, people who would prefer that Leonardo DiCaprio's top keep spinning and not fall over. They would rather that. And they would not want questions answered. They would not want any sort of conventional resolution, which I would say a sequel would do. But at the same time, though, if it means telling a really good story, allowing these characters to go in some new and some very interesting directions, I am all for it. And even with his disdain for the original film, Mike Flanagan still does a great job showing fidelity to it because he understands how much you love it, even to the point where he approaches every nod to the original film with the utmost delicacy. In fact, it's Mike Flanagan's very disciplined approach that had me doing something which I had to applaud him for. Now, recently it's been a trend in a lot of major tentpole movies where people are like saying, oh no, you can't recast, so they have to cast the original actor to come back and play the character, and they use CGI de-aging. Now, a lot of times this works really, really well, but a lot of times it's a misfire. For every Nick Fury in Captain Marvel, you've got the kids from in It Chapter 2. Puberty's a bitch, especially for post-production work. But what Mike Flanagan decides to do here is just throw out all that and just focus on recasting the best actors he can find to embody the characters well enough. The one who's a standout, though, is Carl Lumbly, who steps in for Scatman Crothers as Dick Hallorann. He was able to find that blessed balance where it's still his performance, but it's still unrecognizably Dick Hallorann from the original film. And that kind of balance is actually a reflection of what Mike Flanagan achieved with this film. On one side, it is incredibly loyal to both of King's books, but it also is incredibly beholden to the original film. How you feel about it, that is entirely up to you. Some people may not like it because they question whether or not it needs to happen. Others may just not like this film because it's not as scary as the original. It is entirely up to you. But for myself, I love Dr. Sleep. I'm definitely putting it in the pantheon of other great Stephen King adaptations, but I will acknowledge that it's not for everyone. So for that, I'm going to give Dr. Sleep a Narcotic Casserole rating of... Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think this film should never have happened? Or do you think that this is definitely the sequel that The Shining deserved? Leave it all in the comments below, and for more addictive content on Narcotic Casserole, simply like, share, subscribe, click. That shall be served.